Well, hello, and welcome to my first YouTube video. I just created this channel to, talk a little bit about Deltarune, about some of the theories, some of the character analysis. Maybe I'll talk about some other video games, some other media as well in the future, but who knows. Anyways, today's video is about what's been happening the past few days in the Deltarune community. In these past few days have been really interesting because we got a sort of an ARG type thing in the chapter 4 slash thank you page in the Deltarune website. And in that page, we got the question that has been tormenting us, Deltarune fans, these past few days. How long did it take her to smile? So, let's begin from the very start. On May 8th or May 9th, depending on your time zone, we got a newsletter that was mostly just talking about the release of the game, since it was before chapters 3 and 4 released. But we also got some new pages in Spamton Sweepstakes, along with the alternate ending for the Spamton Sweepstakes video. But in these new pages, the important ones are the ones that included chapter 4 in the link. So deltarune.com/chapter 4 would lead you to a page that was just nothing but a red pixel. If you clicked on that red pixel, it would lead you to chapter 4/message, which had that same red pixel, except now there were some sort of like hitboxes below the pixel that were arranged in a keyboard pattern. This keyboard pattern thing, every time you clicked on one of the hitboxes, you would get to an audio file. But there were some of these hitboxes that would lead you to a different audio file, and if you took those that led you to a different audio file and laid them out in an actual keyboard, it would spell out thank you. So that was him to put in the link deltarune.com/chapter 4/thank you, which would lead you to a page that had nothing but 3 squares, 2 in which you could type in something, and one that was just a submit button. At the time, we had no idea what this was or what you had to do, but we knew that the title of this page said, how long did it take you to smile? So this page remained open for around 12 hours, and eventually we figured out that we had to put in our email in the first box, and in the second box we had to put an answer to that question, how long did it take you to smile? So around 1 day later, after the page closed, the people who submitted an answer got some really weird emails. They were from the same address that sends out the newsletters, but they had no subject, and some of them were blank, and some of them just said you answered, and whatever answer they submitted. So if you had submitted a number with or without a unit of time, you would get an email that just said you answered. Let's say you answered 10 days, then the email would literally just say you answered 10 days. And if you didn't put any unit of time, it would randomly pick one. So if you just put 10, it would randomly pick 10 days, 10 seconds, 10 hours, or whatever. And people who didn't answer their number got a completely blank email. And at the end of these emails, for both of them, whether you sent a number or not, there was this text reading, you are getting this email because you for the mailing list, which is the same text that's in the Deltarune newsletter, but with some parts just completely redacted and obscured for some weird reason. Anyways, at the time we had absolutely no clue what to do with this. Most people just kind of figured that this was some weird teaser for like chapter 5 or something, but we didn't really know what was going on right now. Or well, at the time it could have also been a teaser for chapter 3 or chapter 4, right? Which it kind of was. It kind of was a teaser for chapter 4 we wrote. But anyways, a few days ago, on December 19th, one day after the most recent newsletter dropped, the thank you page opened again. So the people who had answered some, any answer that they had submitted the last time got sent an email that just said another chance and linked you to the same page, Deltarune/chapter4/thank you. This time the page stayed open for a little longer, for around 24 hours, and around a day later, again we got some emails. But this time they had some pretty cool responses. So let's get to it. The responses. The most important part. I'm gonna try to save all the major theories and analysis for the end, but for the more specific theories for one specific response, I'm gonna probably say it as I read the response, what my thoughts are, what my theories are. But anyways, I decided to put them into two groups. In the groups of answers that had numbers, and the answers that had phrases or things, things that didn't include numbers or measurements of time. First of all, the two most common answers, and the one that most people got, were the responses for answers 11 and 1225. Now, 11 was the most common answer by far, because people thought that with the information we've gotten in the new chapters, more specifically in chapter 4, we got that one cutscene where you tell Chris to think about Noel, and in that cutscene, the time between picking the option think about Noel and the time where the text box fully reads out thank you, the time between those 2 points is exactly 11 seconds. And then in chapter 3, in the egg room, we got the Forgotten Man talking about whatever 11 hours or 11 years Deltarune will be waiting, whatever that means. So people thought 11 was a very important number, specifically to do with time, and since we knew that the answer was most likely some sort of unit of time, some sort of measurement of time, then people decided to input 11 as their answer. Toby didn't really like this much, apparently, because the response people who answered 11 would get was, if you follow the same path as everyone else, you won't pass through here. AKA, don't be a sheep, make your own answer, right? So 11 wasn't that important at the end of the day. But the one that was pretty cool was the answer that we got for typing in 1225, which, it's a pretty popular number within the Deltarune community because it's the number for Christmas, the 25th of the 12th month, aka December holiday. And the response that we got for inputting this number was, when you have a bath, everything looks like a ball. Now, what this means exactly, I have two theories on. Number one is just Toby telling us not every mystery has to be related to this, so don't focus only on this, focus on any of the other characters, right? So, when you have a bat, everything looks like a ball would be like, when you're thinking of this, you're gonna get confirmation bias of, oh crap, this one mystery, it's related to this, that is the answer to everything, right? But at the same time, I think it could have a second meaning, which could be some sort of insight to what Des was like as a character before she went missing, or maybe after she went missing. and she became the knight, if you want to think about it that way. Maybe she had some sort of violent tendencies, kind of like Chris is implied to have by Irem during the sword route in chapter 3. So maybe that's why Des and Chris were so close, because we know that they were close. We know that probably Chris was the only one around whenever whatever happened to Des happened to her. So maybe that's why they became so close? Maybe they shared some of the same struggles? I don't know. Anyways, let's get to the answers that were numbers with some sort of time limit. In general, these responses that you would get if you typed in a number and a time limit would be heavily dependent on how long this time was, you know, the range of time you inputted. So for example, from 0 to 10 seconds, you would get the response, she never stopped smiling. So how long did it take her to smile? Since it's so little time, then she never stopped smiling. Then from 11 seconds to 12 hours, you would get the response before the sun went down. So in general, how long did it take her to smile? Less than a day. From 12 hours to 1 day, you would get the response, the next day you'll see her smile. So how long did it take her to smile? Till the next day. From 1 year to around 7 years, and this is pretty interesting that there's a big gap of like times, you know, any amount of time from 1 day to 1 year would get no like specific response. So that's pretty interesting. But anyways, from 1 year to around 7 years for what I've been able to see, you know, when I researched for this video, I mostly looked at the responses that people got on Twitter and on the Deltarune Reddit. But for what I can see, the cutoff for this one is 7 years, but I'm not too sure, so I'm saying around 7 years. For this amount of time, you would get, it was the first time she ever smiled in her life. And if you inputted 7 years or more, you'd get, it was the first time she smiled since she was a child. Which is very interesting. This part is very, very interesting, because it kind of contradicts itself, doesn't it? These two responses contradict themselves. Because if, for example, we have 5 years and 10 years. If you answered 5 years, you would get, it was the first time she ever smiled in her life. But if you answered 10 years, which is longer, you would get, it was the first time she smiled since she was a child. So like, a shorter amount of time implies it's the first time ever in her life, but a longer amount of time implies it's the first time since she was a child. That's weird, isn't it? So I think I'm gonna get to this later on in the video, but I think this may point towards her, you know, the her in how long did it take her to smile? Maybe that's not just one specific person and it can be applied to several characters. Maybe. Anyways, any time measurement not mentioned here, got the response. What are you getting at? So for example, if you, as I said, if you put anything anywhere between 1 day and 1 year, you would just get, what are you getting at? And also some like very big amounts of time would get, what are you getting at too? But I'm not really sure what exactly the cutoff is. And it's also very important to point out there's some other ways to get these responses. These responses specifically. So for example, the she never stopped smiling, you would get that response if you answered now. You know, now being 0 seconds because it's now. If you, I saw somebody on answer festival, and they would get the next day you'll see her smile, teasing to the fact that the festival is gonna happen in chapter 5. So the next day in the timeline of Deltarune, I also saw somebody input 4 chapters, which got interpreted as 4 years. So they got the answer. It was the first time she ever smiled in her life. But very interestingly, I saw somebody submit 5 chapters and they didn't get the answer they would have gotten for 5 years. They got the next day, you'll see her smile. Again, teasing to the fact that if this is weird related, which probably is, maybe whatever happens, whatever she smiles is supposed to mean, will happen in chapter 5. So, the numbers with no time units would get one of 2 responses. Any negative number would get, she felt it like a countdown. So, you put -10 or -1000 or whatever, you would get, she felt it like a countdown. And any positive number that isn't 0 through 11 or 12 to 25, because 0 through 10 would get interpreted as seconds. 11 and 12 to 25, we already saw what the responses were. So any number that weren't those numbers would get, but how long is that supposed to be? So, whoever is sending out these emails, is just asking you like, okay, but like, you gotta include a unit of time, because if you don't, then I don't know what you're talking about. Are you talking days? Are you talking years? Are you talking minutes? Anyways, some other responses. These responses are probably the most interesting ones. So I got a list of them right here, but I don't know if these are all of the responses there were. Maybe there were more. But as far as I'm concerned, these are the ones that I found. I managed to find, how many are there? 9 unique responses. But some of them were, I guess you could say, repeated. So multiple people got them. But anyways, the first one we're gonna look at is, do you think that means she still can? You got this response for any answer that implied that she didn't smile. So if you answered she didn't, or like too long, I think somebody answered like she took too long or something like that. You're like, taking too long. But any answer that implied that she didn't smile, the person sending out these emails would ask you, do you think that means she still can? For any answer that contained I don't know, or any sort of like indicator of uncertainty, the response would be, so you don't think it was really you that made her smile? That was very interesting. But I'm gonna see, as I said, more of the analysis towards the end of the video. Then also, if you submitted like 2 options, for example, 11 hours or 11 years, the phrase from the Forgotten Man, you'd get make up your mind. So, just send one, don't send multiple. If you there was one person that sent the phrase she never smiled as it wasn't her smile anymore, and they got as a response, that's where you're wrong. Which from here on out, I think these very specific responses are could indicate that like Toby or whoever was behind like managing all of these emails, maybe some of them were handpicked, because before we saw like clear patterns. For example, with the time units, the amount of time would dictate what response you would get. But some of these feel kind of a little bit too specific, and I wonder if like whoever was in charge of managing these emails just handpicked some of them and wrote special answers, special responses for these answers, right? But I don't know. That's just me speculating. And another thing why I think this is because like this specific phrase says she never smiled at the beginning, and I think that could apply for the first one we saw. The do you think that means she still can? Because that also implies that she didn't smile. So maybe some of these responses were hand-picked and handwritten, but I don't know. Anyways, uh, there were 3 people that got this response. The following response, which was, "You're getting ahead of yourself." This is one of the most interesting ones because the 3 submissions that got this response were, "She never smiled again," "When the cold water fell from the sky," referencing that one unused prophecy panel, and "Until the end of the universe." So yeah, those are again 3 very specific ones that got a very specific response. Then you would, if you sent an answer containing a character's name or the word girl, for example, somebody sent "Until the girl came along," and some other person sent "Until Asriel told her to smile," both of those answers got the response "Aw," which I don't know what to make of that. Like, I'm gonna get to the analysis part later, mostly because I think this one's interesting mostly for the question of who is even like narrating these emails, who's the person like in universe who's like asking us this question, you know? But anyways, if you answered "not applicable," the response you would get was "it is," which is just a direct reference to the weird route and the Spanton Sweepstakes pages, where if you were to type deltarune.com/chapter 1, it would say "not applicable," then /chapter 2 would say "applicable," and /chapter 3 would say "not applicable," and if you hold the left key, it would say "not applicable but," which is just referring to the state, I guess, of the weird route, which is there's no weird route in chapter 1, there is a weird route in chapter 2, and there's no weird route in chapter 3, but you get the explanation on how to start the weird route in chapter 3. So you get all the hints that you have to do it in chapter 2 with Noel, blah blah blah, right? But there's no direct like content about the weird route. It doesn't really matter if you're in a weird route save file or not. Chapter 3 is mostly gonna be the same. Then somebody submitted "she lost track of time," and the response they got was "look at you trying to be all original," which is a very interesting response because this is like, I believe, only the second time something related to the voice lost in the code in the unused dialogue strings is referenced. The first time being back in chapter 2 when Spanton kind of bugs out in his shop and almost directly quotes it in English, and in Japanese I believe he directly quotes the unused strings. So yeah, this is very interesting because this could be the second time we get direct a direct reference to these unused strings, which, if you don't know, the way this is referencing it is because I'm not really sure if it's in the unused dialogue from chapter 3 or from chapter 4 that it begins with whoever the person lost in the code is, probably Des, but I don't know. She goes, how much time has it been anyway? It's been days, weeks, months? If someone told me it has been years, I won't even mind, or like I would believe them or something like that. So we know that the person lost in the code has lost track of time. So these are direct references. And then the last one, which is, I have no idea what to make out of this. And again, this may be the only thing I can make out of this. is that maybe there's further evidence that some of these answers were handpicked, and the responses were like specifically made when people submitted these specific answers. Somebody submitted, "Who is Noel?" And the response they got was, "What is this? A game show?" As I said, I have no idea what to make out of this. Any other phrase, to my knowledge, and very large numbers, but just a blank email with nothing in it, no text. And well, that is all the responses I could gather. So, analysis and theories. What the actual hell does any of this mean? Well, first of all, the two main questions. Who is her and who is narrating these emails? Her? Me personally, I think her can be both Noel and Des. But I don't mean it as in like, oh, those are two possibilities. No, I mean it as like, I think it's simultaneously both of them. Because there's some answers that are very obviously about the weird route. For example, the next day you'll see her smile being, used as a response used as the response, of somebody that answered festival. I think that's just straight up weird route related, and a teaser for chapter 5. Of course, we got the fact that all of this began in the Spamton sweepstakes, and all of the pages previous to this one were related to the weird route with the red pixel that shows up in that one cutscene, and at the end of chapter 4 in a weird route save file. But at the same time, there's some that are just straight up related to this. There's the 1225 one. There's the inconsistency of like a shorter amount of time being the first time in her life, but a longer amount of time being the first time since she was a child. This could mean that maybe we're talking about two different characters with two different ages. We also, like, it also could mean that maybe, like, this character is kind of doesn't have an age because they're missing or dead, I don't know. But, and also there's the she lost track of time answer that's related to this. So I think the her in how long did it take her to smile is both Des and Noel at the same time. And now, who is the person behind these emails? I think there's a good bunch of options here. There's the option that it's Gaster, but I personally just do not think it's Gaster. I heavily doubt it's Gaster because it doesn't, like, all of these responses don't look like the way Gaster types. Like, it's not in all caps. It's not in this cryptic, like, type of speaking. I just think it's not Gastery enough for it to be him. Another option, which is a more convincing option, is that it could be the Forgotten Man. And specifically, I've seen some people point out that like, at least half of these answers seem kind of like, and this whole question in general seems kind of like something a therapist would ask. And the way they respond these submissions. For example, that one where the email says, "So you don't think it was you that made her smile?" The other one that says, "Do you think that means she still can?" This kind of, seems like psychological in some way. So it could be something that is being asked by a therapist. And there's a pretty popular theory out there that the Forgotten Man, due to the whole thing that happened in chapter 4 in the egg room, maybe the Forgotten Man is, or was at some point, Chris's therapist after Des went missing. So maybe it is the Forgotten Man. Maybe it's no character at all, and it's just Toby Fox just sending these emails as a teaser, and maybe it's not supposed to be a specific character. I think that would be boring, but at the same time, I don't really have any counter arguments, so I don't really know what to say about that. Then also, I've seen some people point out that it could be Irem, the Shadow Mantle holder, because some of these answers kind of seem a little bit playful or a little bit sarcastic. You know, for example, the one that I said, like, I have no idea what this means, the game show one, like, what does that mean? Like, and why is that an important answer? So I think since we know that Irem is kind of like mocking Chris most of the time, maybe this is Irem asking Chris something about Noel, maybe something about Des. I don't know. So maybe it could be Irem. There's also the awe response, which is like that could be interpreted as sarcastic. Um, but yeah, I think really we our major takeaways here could be that number one, uh, we're kind of just confirming that the weird route in chapter 5 is gonna be pretty cool and pretty interesting, and we will see some sort of importance in Noel smiling at some point. There's also, I think, at the very this might just be me misremembering, but I believe that at the very end of the main weird route cutscene in chapter 4, like right the frame before it cuts to black, for like a frame or two, Noelle smiles. Like her overworld sprite goes from being like scared to like a nervous smile. So that may also have importance. And also, if you choose to believe that some of these answers are aimed more towards death, maybe we can get a little bit of insight on Death's personality, with the whole phrase of when you have a bat, everything looks like a ball, you know, that could maybe give us some hints to, to what she was like before she went missing, to what her motivations might be. Maybe she's been kind of corrupted as a knight, and now she, you know, doesn't really like know how to differentiate things and people. And that could be the meaning of when you have a bat, everything looks like a ball. And maybe that's why she's seemingly like kinda evil now. So yeah. And also like one last thing that I needed to point out, I guess. Some responses have moved forward with this answer at the end, which um I don't really know what the criteria is for the response to have moved forward with this answer, but maybe this means that some answers were like more important than others, maybe. And also uh the fact that we have this thing about moving forward, and the response with 11 that said you won't pass through here if you follow everyone else. Maybe this is teasing some sort of event that's gonna happen in chapter 5, chapter 6, or whatever. uh Maybe it's teasing some sort of event where we'll have to pass through somewhere by answering some question, some riddle. Maybe, but that's just straight up speculation. There's not really any proof of that, but who knows? Who knows? We Chapters 3 and 4 have proven that we really don't have any idea where the game's going. They were so different from our theories before the game came out that it's anything's possible now, right? So might as well speculate. And also, some emails had until next time as a subject, and this could just straight up mean that we will meet this person in game again. So maybe, if it's the Forgotten Man, this is the Forgotten Man saying like, see you in chapter 5. If it's Iram, it's like we will see Iram again. this one doesn't really matter all that much because it would most likely whoever this character is, we will see them again at some point, right? If not, it would be weird, right? To just have this random ass character just send us emails and then that's it, right? It would be weird. But yeah, I think that's everything for right now. Let me know, if you have any more theories, any more analysis for some specific responses, if you found more responses, anything, let me know in the comments. Discuss your theories, and I'll see you sometime. I don't know when I'm gonna upload again, really, but I'll see you later, I guess. I'm out.